This is Democracy Now! I'm Amy Goodman as we turn to a remarkable new documentary that just premiered on Showtime. The film is called 16 Shots. It examines the 2014 murder of African-American teenager Laquan McDonald in Chicago. This is the trailer.
Chicago Police Department averages maybe 30 police shootings a year.
I think it's a level of people being desensitized from the violence.
When you look at the police reports that were signed off, it's a justified shooting.
And if somebody gets near you with an open knife, I'm sorry, but that's a threat.
What the local news put out there.
An individual with a knife coming at the officer.
That is not the story. This boy been shot. And it's a lot of bullet holes in him.
I'm just going home.
There is police dash cam video that contradicts the official story.
What we saw was, in our opinion, a first-degree murder.
There's an escalation of involvement from people across the city.
Justice for us is Jason Van Dyke being convicted of the murder of Laquan McDonald.
He was their son. He was their brother. He was them.
Chicago has not had to reckon with what happens when you don't hold folks in law enforcement accountable.
Almost overnight, the power and legitimacy of city institutions cratered.
There's 86 minutes that are missing.
The Laquan case was not a cover-up. It's a story of our racial nightmare in this country.
If he is acquitted.
The trailer to 16 Shots, the new documentary on Showtime. Former Chicago police officer Jason Van Dyke was found guilty in 2018 of second-degree murder, sentenced to 6 years and 9 months in prison for McDonald's murder. Van Dyke was also found guilty on 16 counts of aggravated battery, 1 count for each of the 16 bullets he fired at McDonald. Well, Democracy Now! Recently spoke with Rick Rowley, director of 16 Shots. I began by asking him to lay out how this film chronicles this case, beginning with the day Laquan McDonald was murdered.
We show the moment that every single actor along this process kind of steps in. From the beat cops who initially respond, the first thing they do is they erase. It seems very clear. They destroy evidence. They erase this surveillance video that's from a Burger King that's across the street. 80 minutes are just erased off the machine. They shoo away witnesses. They take some civilian witnesses back to City Hall, and those witnesses describe to us, for the first time on camera in this film, they describe being threatened by officers and being coerced into trying to say that they didn't see what they saw. Immediately what happens is the spokesman for the Fraternal Order of Police, the police union in Chicago, comes out and he creates the first version of this story. And that's a story that goes out to the press everywhere. And that is almost always the first and last story. I mean, there are 30 to 60 police shootings a year in Chicago, every week or every other week. In the course of my lifetime, that's thousands of people who've been shot, and the cases all end in the same way: a small note in the end of the press, and then we turn the page.
I want to go back to Burger King, where the police come into the Burger King that has closed-circuit TV. They don't have a warrant. What do?
They demand access to the surveillance system. They don't have a warrant. They don't have any legal rights to go in and seize the equipment, but they do anyway. They get the night manager to give them the password in there. We can see them on the surveillance footage, messing around with the computer system. And the next day, 87 minutes from all of the cameras is just missing. And we know we actually did a bunch of research. We contacted the engineers who install these systems, and this just doesn't ever happen. Not only is it missing, but there's multiple redundant backups on that machine that are all also missing. So it seems evident that the officers on the scene there, erased that footage and just made it disappear.
Rick, there were witnesses, non-police witnesses at this late night killing. These are the witnesses in your film to the shooting. Alma Benitez, but first, Xavier and Jose Torres.
I don't want to talk bad about all police officers because they're not all bad. I have a lot of friends that are police officers. But, you know, after seeing this, I lost pretty much the trust in the police. We were traveling northbound on Pulaski. I was actually the first car that pulled up at the scene.
I had just barely come out from work. I was headed to Burger King. I see a guy running next on my window. He was getting chased by the cops. They were chasing him.
We had the street lights, so we were able to, you know, get a good view of what was going on. There were a lot of police officers, and it just seemed like he was just trying to get away from what was going on.
The first shots came in, and he dropped.
Shots and saw him drop. He literally dropped.
And there was small pulse. I seen Laquan McDonald move. It didn't seem like he was getting up. It just seemed like he was in pain. But that's when all the shots started coming in.
He was on the ground, still more shots came at him.
While the gunshots were going in, his just body kept jumping. You could tell he didn't have no life in there no more. And next thing I remember is yelling, "Stop shooting, he's dead already."
I was kind of upset, and I said, "Why are they still shooting him? He's on the ground."
From what we've seen, he wasn't posing any type of threat.
The detectives called me over, and they took us to the precinct. They separated us in 3 different rooms.
They brought me into a small office, and they started questioning me and asking me what happened.
I talked to several detectives, not one, and they kept asking me the same questions over and over again. What did you see? How many gunshots did you hear? The more I kept telling them of what I saw, they were trying to make me, they would tell me stuff like, "Well, we're watching the video and your story does not match." And I said, "Well, if it doesn't match, then, and you have a video, what am I doing here?" And they said, "Well, you know, it's not good to lie." They really wanted me to change the story about how many shots I had heard. If I didn't tell them what they wanted to hear, I definitely thought I was going to go to jail.
That's Alma Benitez talking about what she saw, and Jose and Xavier Torres before her. Now, compare these eyewitness reports to the spokesperson and the head of the Fraternal Order of Police.
Yeah, clearly, I mean, Pat Camden arrives on the scene, and he immediately packages for the press the official police response, which is that this was a violent offender who was waving a knife in a menacing way and had to be shot. You know, the stunning thing is that even after the video is released, even after Pat Camden, Dean Angelo, who's the spokesman for the FOP, Dean Angelo, the former head of the FOP at the time, and Gary McCarthy, the police chief, even after they saw the video, they looked at it and said that this looks like a justified shooting.
But Van Dyke was not the first officer on the scene.
Yeah, one of the interesting sort of poignant parts of the story is that the first responding officers, they're responding to a 911 call saying that there's a kid who might be breaking into trucks in a truck yard. They show up. It's Officer Gaffney and Officer McElligott, and they do everything kind of by the book, as you would expect, law enforcement officers to deal with it. They don't provoke McDonald. They see he has a knife. They follow behind him 10 paces back with their lights on, and they call in and ask for a taser, for the only kind of non-lethal enforcement they have. They follow him for a significant amount of time. More and more officers are arriving. The taser is on its way, and then suddenly Van Dyke's car pulls up. He jumps out of his car, and in under 6 seconds, he's unloading his clip into Laquan McDonald. And so these officers have now just witnessed an atrocity, and they go and they all have to make their statements. So the statements there are 9 other officers on the scene. Most of the statements say that tell a completely unfactual account of what happened, that Laquan was waving the knife, advancing on Officer Van Dyke, which obviously is just a lie. Several of the officers say, "I didn't see anything." The officer who's driving the car that has the dash cam in it claims that they didn't see anything happen. So that was, the greatest act of resistance probably that was imaginable for an officer at that time, knowing that even if you tell the truth, nothing's going to happen to this officer because nothing ever has in the 180-year history of the Chicago Police Department, and that the only outcome is going to be that you're going to end your career potentially and put yourself in danger. So, so anyway, all of the officer statements kind of corroborate this completely untrue story that Laquan was the aggressor.
Let's go to the clip. It begins with the FOP spokesperson. Mind you, none of these guys are in power in office right now. Pat Camden, and then to the head of the Fraternal Order of Police, also not there. And ultimately, the police chief, Gary McCarthy, was fired as well.
As you look at something frame by frame, again, without the emotions that are involved, you can draw a conclusion. My conclusion was, the officer did what he had to do to protect himself.
I see a situation that is gotten away. I don't know where everybody's head is at in that situation.
There's a knife. I'm sorry, but that's a threat. If somebody gets near you, within 21 feet of you, with an open knife, you could die.
As you saw and I've seen, Laquan McDonald was murdered. This family wants justice to be served, and justice for us is Jason Van Dyke being convicted of the murder of Laquan McDonald.
Which of these people is not like the other? Which of these people just doesn't belong? And that's Pastor Marvin Hunter at the end, the grand uncle of Laquan McDonald.
Yeah, it is one of the remarkable things is that in spite of all the facts that we have about this case, in spite of the video, in spite of all of the evidence that's come forward, those facts are not enough to secure the narrative. Even in the face of those facts, there is another story, a competing story that is very powerful in this country and that's built on racial fear. And that is what was being mobilized on the other side of this sort of discourse. So you see that unfold in the trial. The defense invokes it constantly. There are these amazing moments where Dan Herbert, the defense attorney for Officer Van Dyke, talks about this as a horror film. He says, imagine you're watching a horror film and the monster suddenly turns and looks at you, and then the music starts to play. That's what happened here. So he's casting Laquan McDonald as a monster. Dean Angelo says, the former head of the FOP, says to Jackie Suin, the producer and interviewer, people need to recognize no one's accepting the fact that what we need to do is go after that monster who doesn't belong in the street with you or my wife or my daughter. Basically, with white women, like invoking the oldest nightmare, American racial nightmare there is.
So October 20th, 2014 is the day Laquan McDonald is gunned down by Jason Van Dyke. Again, Van Dyke then controls the narrative, or the FOP does, by saying that he felt his life was threatened. No one saw otherwise, so this was just par for the course. Mm-hmm. Talk about then how this case developed, how it changed from that night.
Yeah, so that would have been the end of it, ordinarily, in any one of these thousands of other cases where this has happened. But two things happened that weren't expected. First, a whistleblower in law enforcement got in touch with investigative journalist Jamie Calvin and told him there's a video out there. There's a video, and it's horrific, and he was worried that it might be destroyed if no one started asking for it. The other parallel thing that happened was the family began to ask questions. So Pastor Marvin Hunter, the great uncle of Laquan McDonald, when Laquan's body was delivered to the funeral home, the funeral home called him up and told him, in the news they're saying he was shot once in the chest, but he's full of bullet holes. So they took pictures and they took those to an attorney, and they began the process of exploring civil litigation around the case, which ended up opening a separate kind of line of inquiry that helped rip the case open.
This isn't about just public officials changing changing their minds, or video coming out from an insider in the police department. This is about people on the ground who couldn't take it anymore. Explain how that movement built. Who is Will Calloway?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's definitely true. That one of the essential processes through this is that everyone inside the system is playing by the rules of a game that's existed for over 100 years, and they know that they're going to win because they've always won. But what they don't realize is that outside in the street and in culture, the rules of that whole game are changing. They live in a different world by the end of this case than they did at the beginning. And they live in a different world because there's a social movement out there that changed that world. And Charlene Carruthers, the former head of BYP 100, and Will Calloway, an activist who became involved with this case from the very beginning, are responsible in a large way for those changes that happened. So Will was an activist working on police issues on the Rekia Boyd shooting, which happened in Chicago a year earlier. When he read Jamie Calvin's piece that revealed that there was a video out there, he FOIA'd for the video. Along with a bunch of other media outlets, like a couple dozen media outlets FOIA'd for the video. All the FOIAs were denied. Ongoing investigation. It's a typical logic that is deployed whenever people want to keep things hidden. Everyone else dropped it. Will didn't drop it. He sued the city. He sued the city and he won. It was another unprecedented moment for transparency in the city.
And so talk about what happened next. The judge ruled it would have to be released within a few days.
Yeah. So suddenly the city realizes that this entire machine that they had had faith that would continue to function had fallen apart. It had just exploded. And so the state's attorney, Anita Alvarez, immediately brings murder charges against Officer Van Dyke. This is the first time an officer's ever been charged for murdering a black citizen. A day before the video is released. Then the video is released, and it sends shockwaves through the city, because this video is, there are a lot of videos of these shootings that are circulating now. Most of them are, shaky cell phone videos, partial recordings. The recording begins, partway through the encounter. This video is unparalleled in its clarity. It's a locked-off shot from the dash cam of a police car, and you see every second of Officer Van Dyke's interactions with Laquan McDonald. You see his car pull up, him jump out of it, and begin to fire. There isn't a second before the video starts. You see everything, and because it's happening on a street with the lane lines painted, it might as well have been taking place on graph paper. You can see that Laquan is moving away. You can see that he's no threat. It has and you can see his body lying on the ground while Van Dyke continues to shoot into him. It's unprecedented in its clarity and in the horror that you see in it.
All of this is playing out before the video is released. In the mayoral re-election of Rahm Emanuel, and explain what happened exactly when the video dropped in the process of his campaign, and also a settlement the family made that people did not know about for quite some time.
Yeah, so the city, we know from internal email and communications that have been, that journalists sued for and have been released, that the city was obsessed with this case. All of Mayor Rahm Emanuel's senior staff were discussing it. They were, circulating stories about it. They were talking about the video, but there was no lawsuit filed about it yet. So Rahm Emanuel is in a very tight runoff and he didn't win an outright majority in the first election. It's in a runoff. It's very close. It looks like he might lose, and this video could be released at any moment by the family if they decide to bring charges. So the lawyer for the city, the mayor's office sends their lawyer to make a $5 million settlement with Laquan McDonald's family before any charges have been filed. There's no lawsuit. It's a preemptive settlement, $5 million to delay the release of the video till after the election is over.
So Anita Alvarez, you and Jackie Suen interview several times, the state's attorney who does not bring charges against Jason Van Dyke, even though she clearly has seen this video. What did she have to gain by not bringing charges?
Well, it was great Because when heads really started to roll around this case and the institutions inside the city split, turned against each other, people began briefing against each other. And so we were able to get much more candid interviews from everyone around. It's a great moment to be a documentary filmmaker when that happens. But we interviewed Anita Alvarez while she was still state's attorney, and she makes it very clear. She admits that she saw the video right away, but she says, it's very hard to prosecute police officers, and you know, we thought we would lose. But once the video is going to be released, and they know it's going to be released, she's worried about civil unrest in the city. She's worried there'll be riots. So she charges Van Dyke with murder the day before the video is released to try to preempt the anger that everyone knows is going to roll out into the street.
So Rick Rowley, set up this next clip.
So charges have been brought against Van Dyke the day before this video is released. The whole city doesn't know what to expects civil unrest. The police are on high alert. People are talking about riots, and the movement, when the whole city clusters around their phones and their computers to watch the video the moment is released. And when they see it, it is shocking, it is graphic, it is horrific, and the protesters pour out into the streets on Black Friday, the busiest shopping day of the year, and they shut down
the day after Thanksgiving.
The day after Thanksgiving, and they shut down the Magnificent Mile in downtown Chicago.
This clip begins with Charlene Carruthers.
He was shot 16 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. He was shot 16 times.
16 shots, shut down! 16 shots, shut down! 16 shots, shut down!
Son, he was their son. He was their brother. He was them.
16 shots! 16 shots!
You know how many times I ran from the police growing up in the city? How many times that I was put in a position where Chicago police pulled guns on me? So when I saw Laquan, I saw me.
Will Calloway. So when I saw Laquan, I saw me.
Yeah, that is, that's a sentiment that was felt throughout the kind of movement out there. Will has described it at different times as a kind of divine justice or divine poetry, that Laquan McDonald, a figure who was so marginalized in the city that he was practically invisible up until the moment of his death, ended up taking down the most powerful people in the city of Chicago.
So the trial takes place September of 2018. Describe the moment of the verdict.
The trial has been this amazing kind of public spectacle in Chicago, the focal point of the city's attention for the weeks that it happens. And as the jury is, as the case is given to the jury and they go in to deliberate, the city's on the edge of its seat. I mean, the people again are fearing riots. If there's an acquittal, when everyone is called back because there's a verdict is ready, I'm filming in front of City Hall because 100 or 200 activists have gathered in front of City Hall, and their plan is they're certain it's going to be a not guilty verdict. It's unimaginable that a police officer will be found guilty of murdering a black citizen, and so their plan is to go inside City Hall and shut it down. Shut it down if it comes back not guilty, and be arrested. So we're standing outside. The whole group is leaning into their cell phones, playing the video over megaphones or the audio over megaphones. It is this incredible moment. And as the verdict is read, first guilty of second-degree murder, and then the 16 counts, one for every shot. Shot 1, guilty. Shot 2, guilty. Shot 3, guilty. As those shots are being read out, people are weeping. They're in tears. Something unimaginable has happened to them. It's like a tear has opened in the fabric of political reality, and something else is visible on the other side of it. I have seldom seen moments of that kind of intense public intimacy. I was incredibly grateful to be able to be there and see it. But there was a feeling amongst everyone there that that a page had been turned, and that we were in a new moment that we were gonna all have to find out what it meant.
Ultimately, though, while he was found guilty of each of those 16 shots, while Jason Van Dyke was found guilty of second-degree murder, his sentence.
So months later, in January of this year, the two things happened days apart. First, there was a conspiracy trial for the other officers on the scene, where they were charged with conspiring to cover up this murder. All of them were acquitted. The next day, Van Dyke was sentenced, and the Judge Gahn, decided not to consider the 16 counts of aggravated battery, one for each shot, only consider the second-degree murder, and gave him 6.5 years, eligible for release in 3 years. And we talked to the jurors who felt betrayed. I mean, they went in there. So each count of aggravated battery carries 6 to 30 years per count. They thought that they were giving a verdict that was going to mean Van Dyke was going to jail for the rest of his life, and instead it was shortened to less time than. I mean, there are hundreds of people in Cook County Jail right now awaiting trial for more than 3 years because they can't afford the $500 it would take to make bail.
And so what do you think is the lesson today as the activists continue in the streets of Chicago, and what this means for the country as Showtime broadcasts your documentary?
I mean, there's two things that cut through this for me. The first is, the scale, the massive scale of the cover-up. I mean, this is not a scandal. This is not aberrant behavior. This isn't 3 people in a room deciding that they're going to clear this one bad officer. This is every institution in the city being complicit in this in some way or another, in small ways or large ways. The other lesson is that for all of the strengths of this machine, it broke down. That wall of silence was shattered in this case, and it was shattered because dozens of people at crucial moments came forward and took brave stands and broke it, and also because of the sustained attention and pressure of movements. I mean, this is a story arc that's 4 years long. People stayed on this. They stayed in the street. They stayed active, and they kept pushing this. And so that I'm in awe of the people of Chicago and of the journalists and the social movements there who maintain the pressure throughout and manage to win victories that have been elusive in every other city in this country.
Rick Rowley, director of the new documentary 16 Shots. It just premiered and is available on Showtime. Rick was nominated for an Academy Award for the film Dirty Wars. And that does it for our show. Congratulations to Democracy Now!'s general manager Julie Crosby and her partner Rebecca Wallach on the birth of their baby, Ryan Joseph Crosby Wallach. Welcome to the world. Democracy Now! Is produced by Mike Burke, Dina Guzder, Nermeen Sheikh, Carla Wills, Tammy Warrenoff, Sam Alcoff, John Hamilton, Robbie Karen, Honey Massoud, Sharina Nadura, Tay Maria Studio, and Libby Rainey. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks for joining us.